Hey everyone, welcome to the latest Stocks and Markets podcast, where we discuss what's driving the stock market, stocks to watch, and much more. I'm Chris Versace, portfolio manager of TheStreet Pro portfolio, and today we're going to move into some new territory, chatting with David Namdar, CEO of CEA Industries, which trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol BNC. Now, CEA is a company that focuses on what it calls regulated consumer markets, and while we'll chat with David about what those are, our focus is going to be on the company's BNB Treasury strategy and how it may offer investors the ability to participate in the BNB chain ecosystem and the Binance Layer 1 blockchain ecosystem coin. But before we get started, I just want to make clear that the Pro portfolio has no position in BNC shares, and this conversation is being provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any securities. David, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Chris. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I have to apologize, David. I had to get that mouthful of stuff out. I don't know if you noticed, I was kind of struggling to do it, so I apologize for that. But I want to jump right into the conversation about CEA because I'm pretty sure that a lot of folks haven't heard about CEA before. And in doing my homework, the company really seems to be something in a bit of a transition where, you know, one of its core businesses is controlled environmental agriculture, but then the prior management team acquired Fat Panda, which manufactures, e-cigarettes, vape devices, primarily in Canada. And now we've got this BNB Treasury effort. So I'm curious to see how this all kind of came about. Why don't we start there?
Sure. And so CEA Industries had been around for a while, as you mentioned, and the company had been working on a number of different plans, including the acquisition of the Fat Panda brand. And I think when we engaged in discussions with management about the ideas to run a BNB Treasury strategy, they were pretty excited about the opportunity and kind of the path forward. And so the deal came together very quickly. We decided to raise a PIPE transaction and to do it as a direct merger into the company. And so now it exists as a subsidiary of CEA Industries, but we're evaluating how it fits within the existing business lines.
All right, David, let me just back up a second, because you said kind of when we contacted management and then there was a merger. So what you're telling me is that, CEA Industries today is different than it was in the past. There was a transaction that kind of happened. Just kind of walk us through that if you can.
Sure. So I guess to step back, one thing that would be good to talk about is just recently one of the newest trends that's been happening in the digital asset market has been a wave of digital asset treasury companies.
Yes.
And so that was really kicked off about 5 years ago by Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, now rebranded to Strategy. And so it was just the 5-year anniversary of his first Bitcoin purchase, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. And he now has had a number of copycats, both in the US and across the world, who are employing similar strategies. And the idea is for them to use their balance sheet and use their public equity offerings and other financial structures to accumulate as much as possible of the underlying asset. And in their case, Bitcoin. And now we've seen that happen for a number of other unique digital assets. And so myself and the 10X Capital team had engaged with CEA Industries in order to affect a similar strategy focused on BNB, which is one of the more unique and most interesting crypto assets today.
Now, why do you say that? And I'm asking this, as they say, for a friend who may not be as familiar with the world of crypto. If you take a look at, some of the platforms out there, there's hundreds of different cryptocurrencies. I think there's some very esoteric ones, some very niche ones out there. What was it about BNB that kind of attracted you guys to this?
Sure. So it's a story that's followed me now for quite a while on my crypto journey. After I had founded Galaxy Digital a number of years ago, at one point I had almost considered being the CEO of Binance US when they had first entered the US market. Now, Binance a lot of people have heard of, but might not be that familiar with because it hasn't been very active in the US markets. But Binance is the largest crypto exchange globally. They now, I think their latest numbers are they're just about to hit 290 million users globally. So it's an order of magnitude larger than Coinbase and Kraken and any of the other exchanges that more of the users in US retail are familiar with. And so Binance had introduced BNB as Binance Coin back in 2017, and they've been actively focusing and building the chain for the last 8 years now and contributing to its growth. And I believe since it was introduced, it is the only asset that has outperformed Bitcoin since that period.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Now, so, BNB, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the fourth largest token, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So why not go with one of the top three? Or is it just too crowded of a space now?
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. And so, when Michael Saylor first came out, he really was a pioneer and set off this whole wave. And he actively has been contributing to others following in his footsteps. He's been organizing Bitcoin for corporates and teaching the management teams of many large publicly listed companies and private companies how to accumulate Bitcoin on their balance sheets and how it's a much better asset than holding the underlying fiat currency. In the last couple of months, since Joe Lubin went out and started Sharplink Gaming, SBET, he really kicked off this wave of Ethereum treasury companies. And that's the number 2 largest asset. And that's really done phenomenally well in the last couple of months. And so now investors have been kind of trying to capitalize on the hype and going and looking at all these different crypto assets and which ones make sense to have a digital asset treasury and which don't. For me and my team, when we looked at the space, the only thing that stood out to us, or as being the most compelling, was BNB. And the reason, because it's still probably the most overlooked crypto asset today that has the best risk reward dynamics and the best fundamentals. That, as I said, it's one of the only ones, I think the only one that has outperformed Bitcoin since 2017. Additionally, it's backed and tied to the largest crypto exchange in the space. Now, I'm still learning all the incredible data points about the BNB chain as I get more and more, I dive deeper and deeper into it. But just as an example, it is the largest, the most widely held and largest cryptocurrency today. There are 290 million users on Binance. More than 90% of them hold BNB. And so in the sense that it's not what everyone considers widely used, that it's all direct on-chain activity, but in terms of being held by over 250 million users of Binance, I don't think any other crypto asset, even Bitcoin, has that level of holdings today.
And you talked earlier about the expanding ecosystem. And I just want to kind of step back and, for the layperson, when we think about cryptocurrency, there's a lot of questions about it. I think if you, trace it back, it can be volatile. So there's a lot of, some skepticism out there. What, as you see it, given your experience, your history with crypto, what's the opportunity that you're trying to capture? And how does that kind of relate, if you'll forgive me, to the everyday investor?
Sure. So I think what's been exciting about being in the crypto space for so long as I have, and I first got involved in 2012, running around the streets of New York, going to some of the earliest Bitcoin meetups and speaking at some of the earliest conferences in 2013 and 14. So I've met people that have been in the space and a lot of the founders who've been building for the longest. And so, what I think is finally becoming more apparent this year, as the regulatory environment has gotten much better, the opportunity for realizing the value of crypto assets has really been unlocked. And so that's where we're seeing this convergence of the crypto and digital asset ecosystems and the public market ecosystems. And so both are kind of getting into each other's markets, where we're seeing crypto assets now being held by public companies, and we're seeing public companies try to figure out how to deal with tokenization and the wave of real world assets. And so again, this ties into why BNB and why Binance. Binance is the largest exchange in the world. And so this is where in the US, people are very familiar with the US being the most dominant capital market. The US exchanges have the most liquidity. The US exchanges have the most trillion-dollar companies. Well, guess what? There are a couple of very large companies in China that now have done ADRs in the US and have become well known. Binance and BNB essentially is the largest company or the largest potential ecosystem in the entire crypto space that's not listed in the US and not well known to the US retail.
So this is kind of a play on tapping into that market, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just tapping into the global market. Sorry.
Right. But it's not you're the vehicle by which someone can do that because it's not listed in the U.S.
Exactly. Now there have been, I think the only exchange in the U.S. that listed it was Kraken, and it hasn't been listed on Coinbase or any of the other big exchanges. There's no ETF focused on BNB. So really what we're trying to build here is the number one method of exposure for access to BNB and access to the entire BNB chain ecosystem. And we think that we're going to be the ones that are the most capable of accumulating BNB and really increasing the amount of our holdings.
Okay, so before we move on, I just want to tackle this notion of the BNB ecosystem, right? Because, we've seen, a number of different, I would almost characterize them as false starts in the US, where companies are talking about using Bitcoin and letting consumers pay with it, for example, or let's just say crypto instead of Bitcoin, sorry, right? So how, from your perspective, how has the ecosystem grown and what's likely to foster that greater adoption? Because it seems to me that the bigger the ecosystem gets, right, the more appeal there is, the more demand for BNB.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where, outside of just the activity and the holdings of BNB on Binance, actively BNB chain has been building, I think, the number one DEX, so the number one decentralized exchange by volume. They have the number one amount of transaction volume on the network. I believe they're number two in decentralized applications, so the number of different companies and projects being built on it after Ethereum. And so even recently with the move and excitement on Ethereum is now a $500 billion market cap. BNB, because it's been overlooked and even potentially held down and suppressed, it's only 110, 120 billion market cap today.
Okay, so that again, that's the opportunity that you're looking to play with. Now, you mentioned earlier that you guys kind of came together with CEA through a PIPE transaction, and if I remember correctly, it's about $500 million in gross proceeds, and there's some warrants out there for another $750 million if they're exercised. Correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay, and realizing that we're talking today in the middle of August, roughly how much of that capital have you put to work?
Well, we just announced earlier this week that we made our first acquisition of 200,000 BNB, so just over $160 million today. And we have yet to publicly disclose our plans on our exact timing for buying and accumulating BNB, but I can tell you that our goal is to put all the money that we've raised to work and to continue to raise additional capital in order to accumulate more BNB. Right. One of the key things that I would say about the PIPE transaction that really, again, as an investor myself and a number of other digital asset treasuries, we really structured the deal in a way to make it very appealing to investors. And so some of the other digital asset treasuries have structured an added convertible debt as part of their initial raise. Now, what we didn't like about the convertible debt is it creates adverse incentives between the investors. The convertible debt holders often don't care about what the underlying asset is that the company has on their balance sheet, just that they have a claim on it. And often what we find is that those are institutional investors that manage to short sell or hedge out their exposure to the equity. And so really, when you raise convertible debt, while it might make the entry price more appealing to some of the initial investors, it doesn't benefit the company as much long term. So for us, having all the equity investors also have warrants really creates a level playing field for everyone, where everybody's incentivized and everyone's motivated for the stock price to go higher.
Okay. And you said about 160 million a moment ago, and we're not going to peg you down because we understand that you have to be opportunistic buyers, just like we are opportunistic buyers in the Pro portfolio. But just given your history and how you're kind of, traded and moved around, let's say, cryptocurrencies in the past, what are some of the markers or some of the signs that you look for that could identify a more favorable entry point into BNB?
Sure. So this is something I'm actively discussing, and you're right. Having been in the market for a long time, one of the things that I've always seemed to find is that whenever the price is breaking out, is when people are the most excited and the most interested to jump into different investments, and it stands for the crypto world. It also stands for public equities and many other investments. So I try to always urge people to zoom out and have a little bit more of a cautious and deliberate approach, and really to be, taking a view that whatever they want to allocate or invest into the space, to kind of spread it out over some period of time. That might be 3 months, that might be a year, and then to make the investment over that time period a little bit every month, every day, whatever the cadence is. And so because of that, by doing that, they make sure that they don't get shaken out by the volatility. Because that's one of the things that, for my entire crypto journey, I've helped so many people get into the space. And I'm always trying to protect them from getting hurt by jumping all in one investment, from following the latest fad, jumping into meme coins or NFTs. I'm really trying to help people be thoughtful and make sure that, they enter in a way that they can then stomach the volatility and benefit from the volatility. Because in general, when you have an asset or an investment that's volatile, right, that means you have much higher upside, and volatility can be a great thing.
Yeah, we've written about the use of beta as a measurement, and you have to be willing to take the pain, right? I mean, I think it's really that simple. But I also think you're right. It's foolish for someone, in my opinion, to go all chips in, at any one given time. Better to spread out, use pullbacks to your advantage, wait for some confirming data. Perhaps if it's in it like an individual stock, if you have confirming data that you can boost your price target, then you can get a little more bullish on the name. It sounds like you're saying something similar, but what I do like is that you're talking about a disciplined approach, not necessarily going hog wild.
Exactly. And even now, what we're seeing in this wave of digital asset treasuries, there's a number of them that are trading at 5, 10, 20 times multiples to their underlying their NAV, right, which is the amount of the underlying digital asset they're holding. And I think there are now starting to be a number of great dashboards. Blockworks has a great dashboard that shows and lists out the number of treasury companies. Although yesterday I had to point out to them that they were missing BNB, that they point out Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Solana treasury companies, and yet BNB, which is bigger than Solana, they've managed to overlook. And so to me, that gets me excited again about just how often and people even deeply involved in the crypto space overlook the opportunity of BNB.
So when you pointed this out to them, what did they say?
They responded right away and added it. So I'd say we actually just debuted on their Treasury dashboard at number 13, although I think, or I expect to be quite a bit higher on that dashboard soon.
Okay. Now, you mentioned volatility a moment ago, and I agree. I think that, you have to have the right risk tolerance, depending on what you're investing in. I think that's especially the case in crypto. But as you kind of look out in the crypto space, or even with what you're attempting to do, are there any other risks that folks should be, made aware of?
Sure. So I think with these digital asset treasury companies, there's a big difference in the teams and companies that are putting these strategies on and the amount of expertise they actually have in the space, or whether they're just capitalizing on kind of the liquidity environment that exists today. So,
Right.
Again, like I said, I approach this a lot of times as an investor myself, and I'm still investing in a handful of other digital asset treasury deals, but I'm very selective about the teams and the people that I support, and have ones that I like to invest in, ones that I really believe have the right medium and long-term mindset, that are focused on building and accumulating, not focused on drawing large salaries or taking large expenses and capitalizing just on the amount of capital they raise. I mean, we're really here building this for the medium and long term, and focused on accumulating as much BNB as we can over time. And so one of the things that's really a pleasure for me here is one of my partners in this, CZ, is one of the most important people in the crypto space, not named Satoshi. Probably the most well-known and celebrated person in the crypto space today, and has a really devout following around the world because of what he's been building all along. And he's someone else that, as we talked about volatility, he's out there regularly on his Twitter and elsewhere preaching to people about zooming out and focusing on building and focusing on, during periods of market volatility, about not getting shaken out and hodling, HODL, right? And he's been one of the best people at helping people in the crypto space hold on to and see the long-term vision. And he's been right. Bitcoin and BNB are both near all-time highs. So, taking the mindset of holding through the volatility has been the correct move so far.
Now, you just mentioned, the long-term vision. And, I know that there's a lot of talk about AI, and where we are still in the relatively early innings. Where are we, if you kind of think about it, either for cryptocurrency or BNB? Are we still in those early innings?
Absolutely. So first of all, I like thinking about this in the baseball reference and innings.
Everybody does.
Of course. Now, what's interesting here is that in every prior cycle, there was a period where I saw people really start to talk about what inning we're in. And some people are guessing 2, 5, 7, 8.
Right.
But in the last couple of months this year, I'm not hearing many people talk about which inning we're in yet. So what I take away from that is that we're still quite early here. I mean, for me, my view as of 3 months ago was that based on the mechanisms of these digital asset companies and the liquidity environment in the US and public markets globally, I thought that there was going to be around 50 to 100 billion of capital that's going to come into the crypto market through these digital asset treasuries. In the last month or two, I've revised that, and I now think it's going to be more like 100 to 200 billion over the next year. And so, to me, I think the total market cap today of digital asset treasuries between MicroStrategy and the others is probably around 150 billion. So I think there's just as much capital coming in, and that's not even taking into account the potential for interest rates being cut in the US pretty soon, and a wave of additional capital coming in and surprising the market.
So if you're an investor who's new to this, just given your experience, as you pointed out, there are a number of different copycats out there. There are, various coins that they're really trying to play on. How should somebody, contemplate making their first move if they've never done anything in the crypto space? How do they identify the right company, to bet on? What do you look for?
Sure. So I mentioned already the management teams, and there are people who've been in the space and are committed to building for the long term. I also like picking out the assets that have the most strongest fundamentals. And so recently I saw a quote from CZ where he was talking about how Binance is actively working to build and strengthen the fundamentals of BNB. So to me, there's no other chain that I'm more excited about today that has a stronger case where you have potentially the strongest and most valuable company in the space actively trying to increase and improve the fundamentals of the crypto asset.
So let me just stop you right there, because again, for someone who's never really dug into this, you're saying fundamentals. What do you mean by that? What are the fundamentals that someone should be paying attention to?
Sure. So now around the digital asset treasuries, it's really looking at the entry point of the multiple to MNAV. And it's also the ability of the management to accumulate more of the underlying asset. So that's what I look at when people invest at a premium to MNAV. What they're really doing is they're giving management the opportunity to accumulate more of that asset. And if the management delivers on that, then it creates this flywheel where they can really deliver tremendous returns for the investors. So not every company in digital asset treasury is going to be able to get that flywheel going. And so I think they need to differentiate between the ones that have the strongest management teams and the ones that have the strongest and most unique and interesting assets underlaying that. And so that's where, when I talk about fundamentals, I talk about the growth of the ecosystem, the amount of people that are using it, the amount of developers that are building on it. the amount of transaction activity on the network.
Okay. Does it, I'm just thinking about, something you said earlier about the number of copycats. And, I always get a little concerned when everyone is like flooding into to do the same thing. There will be winners, but there'll be casualties along the way, and that can kind of tarnish the story at some point. Does that concern you at all, or are you just really focused on the long term?
Sure, of course it's concerning. Now, one of the things I've really been touting about the crypto space from early on, and what I love about this is that I look at it like it's the most non-zero sum game the world's ever seen. And what I
Okay.
mean by that is we're the people who've been focused on building in crypto for so long, and some of it from a finance approach, some of it from a technical and technologist approach, some of it from economics. The people are actively recreating aspects of the financial system and other technological systems and reimagining the ways it can work. And by doing that, they're creating a lot of value along the way. And so to me, what gets me excited and what gets me now, this is the most engaged and excited I've been about the space in a number of years, is I think this convergence of capital markets and crypto is going to unlock a tremendous amount of growth in the near future. And so I am an optimist. I'm more excited about the growth opportunities. And I think myself, and I'm going to be actively doing my best to help investors avoid some of the mistakes along the way.
Okay. Wait, what are the, if you had to, kind of give someone some free advice, right? Well, what are the one or two most common mistakes that people make?
Sure. So a lot of times after these deals get announced, with a number of the other treasury deals, we often see the stock price shoot up 5 to 20 times, maybe even more what the stock was before that. And so I think that to me is similar to what happens occasionally when certain digital assets are added to new crypto exchanges. And so you see a lot of hype, and a lot of the people who buy into it in the short term end up overpaying. And it takes a long time, if ever, for the stock prices and the crypto token prices to reach those levels. So really, I would encourage not to buy into the immediate hype, but to wait and see when the dust has settled a little bit, and to start to see if the team is executing on accumulating the asset like they're supposed to, and then kind of buying in as you get a bit more information.
Okay. All right. So let's assume that over the next period of time, call it a year, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it is, you guys continue to deploy the capital that you've raised. How does CEA as a business look different? Because again, the BNB Treasury strategy is one leg of the stool. You have two others. Do you see this becoming the driving horse behind CEA Industries over the next 12, 18, 24 months?
I think what we're seeing is it already is becoming the driving horse of the business. And so, I think as we execute on our strategy, this will be a bigger and bigger part of the business, and we'll make some evaluations about what we do with the other parts of the business. And I think and hope that we're going to end up being able to surprise investors with the amount of BNB we'll be able to accumulate in the not so distant future.
Okay. Okay. And before we get out of here, David, so generous with your time. And thank you so much for kind of answering what to you are probably some very basic questions, but I think it's helpful for the viewers, especially those who are newer to crypto and BNB in particular. But before we get out of here, is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should?
And first of all, this has been such a pleasure. I would just say, again, another one of the things that excites me about the crypto space is just the way that once you start engaging in crypto transactions and actually sending money around the world, it really changes the way you look at money and investing and even value. And so even for our pipe transaction, more than half of the value was contributed in stablecoin. And so the investors actively sent assets or funded their investments by using stablecoin. And so to me, I think it's a really nice kind of point to show, just a validation point of where we are in the cycle and the growth of crypto. And even myself, like I've been focused, and I like to help people start to transact using stable coins, using other crypto assets. And I think, like I said, I would say get to know BNB, because they're going to be hearing about it more and more.
All right. All right. Well, that is noted. One last question, David. For folks who want to learn more about what you're doing in the BNB Treasury, where can they go? What should they be looking for?
Sure. So we've recently put our website out there at bnc.network. We're also starting to be much more active on x.com, Twitter, myself at Namdar, and then BNC Network Co., BNB Network Co., sorry, where we'll be posting a lot of updates about the company and our future plans.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we're going to reserve the right, David, to bring you back. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 9 months, because I am very curious to see what you're doing, and I suspect the following couple months will bring a lot of revelation on that, and I think we'll want to get a great update if you're open to that.
Sure, absolutely. Look forward to it.
Excellent. All right, folks. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning into this episode of the Stocks and Markets Podcast. We'll be back with a fresh episode before you know it.